Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Chris Mueller. From the world of Marvel Comics comes one of the most dangerous assassins and popular heroes of all time, with a cold and efficient fighting style used to aid her fellow Avengers in battle, all while carefully balancing her tremendous heart and immense desire to right the wrongs of her past. We're talking about Black Widow. Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, was created by Stan Lee, Don Rico, and Don Heck, and debuted in Marvel Comics Tales of Suspense number 52 in April of 1964. The original version of the character was a Russian spy with shoulder-length black hair who did not wear a costume. She was soon joined by another deadly villain, Hawkeye, and the two became synonymous with each other from that point on. Black Widow's physical appearance was later updated in 1970. The character now sported long red hair, a skin-tight black costume, and weapons that she wore on her wrists. This became her iconic look, which is still being used for her today. Black Widow's origin story centers on her abduction as a small child in Russia, where she was sent to the Red Room, a training facility used to indoctrinate an army of widow assassins. These assassins were used by the Russian government to infiltrate other countries, eliminating key figures and toppling entire regimes. Natasha became one of the world's deadliest assassins and used her abilities to battle the heroes of the Marvel Universe. But after escaping the brainwashing of her Russian captors, she became an Avenger and later crossed paths with several popular characters, including Spider-Man and Daredevil. Natasha's exploits in the Marvel Universe also include an extensive career as an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., where she used her training and combat skills to benefit the United States. She even faced off against another Black Widow, Yelena Belova, who was also an assassin trained in the Red Room. Scarlett Johansson brought Natasha Romanoff to life in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, beginning with 2010's Iron Man 2, where she was undercover as Tony Stark's assistant. But she eventually revealed herself in the film as Black Widow and quickly became an ally of Iron Man. Black Widow appeared in 9 MCU films, beginning with Iron Man 2, then The Avengers, Captain America Winter Soldier, Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. She also appeared in a post-credits scene of Captain Marvel. Natasha's 9th appearance is 2021's Black Widow film, which premiered on July 9th. The movie takes place after the events of Captain America Civil War and plunges Natasha headfirst back into her past as a Russian spy. She is joined in the film by the Yelena Belova character who grew up as Natasha's sister. Russia's Captain America counterpart, the Red Guardian, is also featured in the film, as well as the villain Taskmaster. The Black Widow film was released to highly favorable reviews from critics and fans alike and continues to break box office records on its opening weekend release. Natasha Romanoff continues to be one of the most popular heroes in the pages of Marvel Comics, and while her future in the MCU seems to be at an end, she remains one of the most important characters in the company's history. And that's the lowdown on Black Widow. Phase 4 of the MCU has been a long time coming. If you're a fanboy or fangirl out there and you've been waiting with bated breath, heavily anticipating the arrival of Phase 4, then that means you've been sitting along with the rest of the world during a global pandemic, hoping and praying that it's over as soon as possible so you can get your hands on some brand new Marvel content. Now, the good news is you've had some stuff to tide you over. We've had some great shows on Disney+, some stuff that continues to go, and things that are arriving in the very near future. And there's reasons, if you're a Marvel fan, to be excited, which is always a good news because, as you guys know, the third M and the 6M is Marvel. So yes, we talk about Marvel here a lot on the show. It's one of the things that we cover, from characters to storylines to particular books to movies to TV shows to everything in between. So Phase 4 kicks off with Black Widow, and this thing I believe was postponed twice, if I'm not mistaken. Unlike a lot of people out there, I don't care much for spoilers. I don't want to know what's going to happen or what people think is going to happen, all this other stuff. I just don't look anything up. I want to see as very few trailers as possible because I just want to watch the film. And some movies get trailered to death. I don't know if I got that feeling with this film. And I didn't go into this thing with anticipation of here's when I think it's going to happen. because as we all know, this movie's taking place about a character who's no longer with us in the MCU. Um, but Black Widow has come, it's arrived finally, and it's getting good reviews. It's getting from critics and fans both, which is always nice, especially if you're a fan of this stuff. It's kind of an odd thing, Chris. I find myself hoping that reviews are good because I love it so much. I always cross my fingers and hope, oh man, please, I hope no one trashes this. Because my fear has always been if enough people trash something, will it start going on the decline, which I never want to happen because I'm just in the bag for this MCU stuff, man. Right off the bat, what's your overall first take of Black Widow?
I liked it. I thought it was a good movie. It's not without its issues, but no movie really ever is. But I thought overall it was a good, strong entry and a nice send off for a character that should have gotten her own movie years ago, frankly.
Honestly, I think she should have been to the table before Wonder Woman was. Really.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it would have been perfect had this movie been released at the point it takes place in the timeline. Like if this was our post
Ooh.
Civil War movie, I think it would have been huge.
Man, that's a great, and it makes me wonder, which I don't have the answer to this. I'm sure there is an answer out there. Why didn't they go that route?
I have no idea. I know that at one point they had just decided, Captain Marvel, that's our first solo female MCU movie, and we're sticking with it. But maybe it was a matter of Scarlett wasn't always available. She's an in-demand actress, so maybe the only points that they had her was for these big team-up movies until recently. I can't say for sure that that's the reason, but she's continued doing a lot of other projects in the years since joining Marvel, so it's not as if she's always available.
That's very true. And I was talking to a friend of mine last night about the whole Captain Marvel thing. And honestly, I think a lot of us are maybe jaded by Scarlett Johansson and her work in the MCU because it's almost like Brie Larson didn't get enough of a fair shake. Which I don't want this to turn into a Brie Larson commentary because Lord knows she's been bagged on enough by a lot of crazy fanboys out there. Um, but in terms of her portrayal as Captain Marvel, I'm not going to say it falls flat for me, but it just doesn't have the spirit that Black Widow does. But again, maybe, dude, that's got a lot to do with we had Scarlet first and had her portrayal of Black Widow, and are we jaded by that? Maybe, and that's so deep in our brains. By the time Brie comes along, it's like, it's not the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, with Brie, I don't necessarily have a problem with her. I think she's a great actress, actually, and I liked the way that the character was portrayed in Endgame.
Yes,
With her movie, there was a theme throughout the movie of she was constantly being told you're too emotional, and that's a problem that women face in the real world. So this movie was trying to address that and then prove that it wasn't actually true. But in doing so, she ended up becoming so emotionless that the performance was somewhat wooden. And
right.
everybody else in the movie stood out more. Monica and Maria Rambeau both were more enjoyable to me in the time that they were on screen than her. But as soon as they put Carol in a different movie with different directors, she came off better to me. So I think maybe that was a problem with the script and the director more than Brie herself. And I think future movies will probably do more justice to her and the character.
Well, in that same vein, how do you feel that Natasha Romanoff came off in this film as opposed to her other? Because this is her ninth appearance in the MCU, and one of those appearances was in the post-credit scenes of Captain Marvel. So overall, how do you think she is in this compared to the others? Is it about the same? Is it better? Is it worse? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's a consistent character portrayal. I feel like we've seen the same character over time evolve. She doesn't feel any different in this than any of the other movies, but they definitely made an effort to not at all have the character's sex appeal be part of this story, which I appreciate. There was a conversation, I can't remember who she was being interviewed by, but she had talked about how in Iron Man 2 her character was basically there to be a honeypot kind of for Tony, like get close to him, use her sex appeal to do that, blah, 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 and that maybe it was a little sexist. And well, I can see that position. I also was like, that's sort of the point of the character in that movie, though. Tony is a chauvinist jerk. He would immediately look at a beautiful woman and be a little disarmed by her. So it makes more sense to send her in than somebody like Clint. You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
So, and that's also the character in the comics is a pretty standard femme fatale. So I never felt like that was problematic. Uh, but times are changing, and I thought that this movie did a great job of making that a non-issue, as well as introducing Yelena as a potential, not replacement because she'll be playing a different character, but to kind of continue on in that Black Widow vein. And she did an amazing job. She was my favorite part of the movie by far.
Oh, she's fantastic. Florence Pugh portrayed Yelena Belova, and yeah, she did great. And wrestling fans remember her as Paige from Fighting with My
Hmm.
Family. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, she did a phenomenal job. The accent sounds great. Talk about bringing emotion to this movie, man. She totally brings it. Very impressed with her. I liked her anyway, but now I love her. And as the post credit scenes will suggest, we're going to see a lot more of her, which I'm totally here for it. Um, One of the things that I get from this going direct, and I'm watching it right now for the third time as we record this. But one of the things that gets me directly into this is you mentioned the whole femme fatale, aspect of her character that's been sort of, I don't want to say exploited, but used in the past in the MCU and in the books as well. She's an anchor for the team. She's very much a cornerstone of the Avengers, and I mean, she's beautiful. I'm in the bag for Scarlett Johansson. I always have been. I'm not ashamed to say it. I think she's tremendous. But yeah, she's beautiful, and the red hair is awesome, and she's gorgeous. However, when I watch these movies, I'm not necessarily looking to say, "Oh, did you see that shot of the cleavage there?" All right, like I'm so far past that way of thinking at my age now, and also, she just looks like a character to me. I don't even really like when I watch Evans. I don't say, "Well, there's a dude, and the Captain America is a dude." Like I'm not really looking at her because, and that goes back to the effort she's put in. I think to elevate the Black Widow character to where she's on the same par as these muscle bound guys that she's sharing the scenes with, sharing the camera with. And man, a lot of times she's not only holding her own, but maybe upstaging them in a lot of key scenes as well. I think she's that good at this.
Oh, absolutely. And really, I think the whole sex appeal thing kind of stopped after the first Avengers. Like, if you go back and rewatch the first Avengers movie now, I still love it.
Oh yeah.
But there's a couple scenes where, yeah, they focus on the outline of her body, whether it be her chest or her butt. And it's a little exploitive, yes. There's a lot of scenes of dudes with their shirts off and focusing on their six pack abs too. So you can't say that the women aren't getting a little eye candy along the way. But what I've appreciated is Winter Soldier was sort of where her character started to be taken a lot more seriously. And ever since then, through Civil War, through the Avengers Endgame, Infinity War, up through now, her character has been much more important. And the way that she's been portrayed is not nearly as stereotypical in one note as it may have started in Iron Man 2. So I think that her character's had a really nice arc, and we've seen her, I don't want to say mature because she's always been a very mature, level headed character, probably one of the most level headed characters in the entire MCU, frankly. She never seems nervous. She kind of always has a plan or a backup plan or a backup plan to the backup plan. But I do feel like we've seen an arc, and we've seen her learn to like accept these relationships with these people. And she used to be a kind of a loner, and now she's got a family, and now she's got two families. So I thought that was a really nice way for them to sort of wrap up her stories, to have her kind of focusing on finding those connections again.
She's always been wanting to establish like there's got to be something more than what I have. And I mean, really, it starts with Clint because they form the relationship first. And in another life, maybe they're more than just, allies. Maybe they're more than just coworkers. And I don't know if they've I can't say they've teased it too hardcore, but there's been moments where it's like, did they have something at some point? I kind of like that we don't know that they've sort of kept it under wraps. But you're right, she's very consistent, level-headed. She has a lot of patience, but a lot of that goes back to her training, which we've heard of the Red Room before, but we've never got the chance to see it in the MCU apart from the comics, and we get to see it here. This movie feels like a mix of Winter Soldier and the Jason Bourne flicks to me, because it's going all over the world. There's a lot of stuff out of costume, which I'm totally fine with, and even Taskmaster in like the scene where the car chase through the street doesn't feel out of place. It just feels like here's the other side trying to get these spies, and it just, I don't know. This movie plays more like a thriller than it does a comic book film. I think for maybe 75% of the movie feels like that to me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think two things pleasantly surprised me about this movie. One was it seemed like they really toughened up her fighting style a little bit. Like all her fight scenes were just a little more brutal than they usually are. You know, her and Florence in that apartment, they were throwing each other through
Oh
furniture
man.
and trying to stab each other. And like, they did a really great job with all the fight choreography in this and just making it a little more visceral than it would normally be, especially considering you're never going to see an overabundance of blood in an MCU movie. So being able to actually portray that level of violence without the blood is impressive. But I was also just kind of shocked by how funny the movie was. There's a lot of genuine laughs in this movie that don't feel forced. Alexi is clearly going to be one of the characters people talk about, but Scarlett and Florence were both making me laugh. Actually, the one thing that made me laugh the most in the movie was what some people might call the darkest joke in the MCU when uh Alexi goes up to Florence and she punches him in the face when they're in the helicopter, like right after they break him out of prison. And he's like, "Oh, is it your time of the month?" She's like, "I don't get my period. They tore out my uterus and my
Right.
ovaries." He's like, "Okay." And she's like, they go up there and they chop it up and take it out. You can't get any more babies. And he's like, "All right, no need to be so clinical." She's like, "I was going to talk about fallopian tubes, but okay." And like that whole exchange was like, it's so dark and sad, but at the same time, she sells it as funny. Like that reality that she and Scarlett are living in is very depressing. Like they were forcibly sterilized. And she somehow managed to make it into a joke that actually gets a laugh. And I don't know, that like something about that just really stuck with me.
And they're so desensitized to what they went through. Like they haven't forgotten, but they've had to experience and have memories of it every day of their lives. So yeah, they're going to be emotionally detached from it to a lot of degree. But his response is the best because it seems like he spends most of the movie going, "What?" Like he doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Hey, David Harbour, dude, is freaking fantastic. I knew he was going to be good, but dude, he steals this movie in a lot of different scenes, man. I love him.
Yes, and I'm very happy that he wasn't killed. I fully expected him to make some kind of heroic sacrifice for his little girls, and he survives the movie, and I was pleasantly surprised. And I kind of hope we see him again. But yeah, he did a fantastic job. And I don't know if you watch Stranger Things, but it's really funny
Oh,
that
yeah.
in that movie, he's kidnapped by a Russian scientist named Alexei, and now he's a Russian named
Ah,
Alexei.
good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, so for comic book fans out there listening to this, you know that Red Guardian is a character in the books, and he is Russia's. According to this film, he's Russia's one and only super soldier. And I would say, according to this film, because it's been years since I've committed to reading comics 100% all the time, and God knows what they've done through the years that I've fell asleep on or am not aware of. But um, he speaks of battling Captain America, and he's countered in the prison that he's locked up in. It's like, well, when did this happen? 83, 84. What, he was still on the ice then. And then of course when he's reunited with his family, the first thing he asks Natasha is like, "Hey, did he talk about me?" And she's like, "What?" And it's
Yeah.
so great, man.
Would he ever have even met Cap? Like, Cap was unfrozen in what, 2010, 2011, something like that.
right?
When would have even had a chance to meet him, let alone fight him? It
Okay,
seems
so
like he's just a blowhard.
well, Iron Man 1's in '08, Iron Man 2's in 2010. First Avenger had to have been in 2011, I would think.
So Cap probably was 2009 then.
Probably so. Yeah, something like that. Here's a question for you, dude. How old is Alexei? Because we don't know that either.
Well, it seems like he's aging at a normal rate because they show him de-aged when Natasha and Yelena are kids, and it seems like he's aged an appropriate amount of time in that 30 odd years, whatever it's been, since that opening scene.
Well, that's true. I'm just thinking, and being frozen in ice has slowed down Cap's aging, obviously, where he's not an old man when they thaw him out because he's been preserved. But I just wonder if it's 95 and we're led to believe he is, I don't know, 60, not 60, but maybe 30. Yeah, no, the timing's not going to work regardless of when. I mean, that's a great question. I guess it doesn't work.
I mean,
Wonder why.
we don't really know how old Black Widow is in this movie, and we don't know exactly how old she is in the beginning either. Like she could be anywhere from 10 to 12 really.
True.
And although they did establish that that scene took place in 95
95 and then,
and this movie takes place in 2016, so
right,
that would have only been 21 years.
21 years later, right.
So yeah, if he's like 30 or 35 whatever when he's in that opening scene, he could realistically be 55 or 60 and look that way.
True. Um, I love the suit. I love that it was a chore for him to get it on. And I love that he comes out of the bathroom and says, "It still fits." I'm like, okay, sure, pal,
Yeah.
whatever. Can barely get the helmet on his head. That's great stuff, man.
Yeah. I saw some people when that came out in the trailer being like, "Oh, it's just going to be Fat Thor all over again, more fat jokes." It's like there was one in this movie and it wasn't even egregious. Like he's an aging guy who's been in prison for 20. Yeah, he's going to put on a little weight. Like
Sure.
yeah, it's not as if Marvel's just looking for a reason to make fun of overweight people.
And you know what? The de aging you talk about with him is so good. I was sitting here thinking, okay, did they de-age him or did he just drop a ton of weight? And because man, it's incredible how good he looks. Like, wow, it's crazy.
Rachel Weisz too. Like you can clearly
True.
see her looking basically like she did in The Mummy.
Very true. I actually forgot that bit, to be honest with you. Yeah. Um, eh,
That's we got to talk about that scene in the beginning for a second. So there's that moment on the airstrip when they first arrive after escaping in that plane that sort of informs a little bit about both Natasha and Alexi's character. Alexi's, whether he loved her or not, isn't really established at that time, but his wife is over on a gurney being attended to for a gunshot wound, and he's talking to some general about I want to get back in the suit. Like, did not seem to care one way or another what was happening to her.
right.
But then a few moments later, Natasha sort of figures out that they're going to get taken, and she starts screaming her head off. She kicks that dude and takes his gun and starts threatening to kill everybody to keep her sister safe. And that scene was, I think, pretty powerful because it immediately established that connection and that affection that she had for her little sister.
Yeah, it's a pivotal moment for them, and like you said, it lays the groundwork for what's going to happen in the future. It's funny because I knew it was them, but at the same time, I didn't kind of really put everything together. The fact that the little girl had blue hair already suggested that she was. It was the idea of trying different looks and maybe she had red hair in Russia and they didn't want her to have red hair here, so she had it blue and maybe had it cut short. And um, it's funny because they do look like a family. Everything looks normal until he comes home and just gives her a look, and she's like, "No, no," and she's like, "I don't want to go," and he's like, "Don't say that," because they knew this day was coming. They knew that S.H.I.E.L.D. was eventually going to find them. And were you expecting to see Coulson at some point in this?
I was expecting some kind of cameo from somebody, and the fact that the only one we really got was Thunderbolt Ross and Allegra at the end
Right.
was a little surprising to me, but I also feel like that was done on purpose to not take away from the fact that this is supposed to be Scarlett's movie.
I like that. I like that take where it's like, well, like you said, it's her flick. We don't want to fill it full of too many people from the other films because it kind of takes away from her, which I totally get. I think the family dynamic from the jump where she's whistling for her and she whistles back, that plays all the way up to the post credit scenes because Marvel is extremely good, as I told you before we started recording here, at connecting the dots, at linking things up, at making even the smallest thing mean something later. The vest that Yelena is wearing, it wasn't until she mentioned the vest I was like, wait a minute, that now I kind of get it. That's what Scarlett's wearing in Infinity War. Like, dude, that got right past me until Yelena's character mentioned it.
Yeah, and I loved that little exchange in the car too when Scarlett sort of is making fun of her. And she's like,
Yes.
"What? It's got all these pockets, and I made some modifications. It's really good." And then a minute later, she's just like, "It's actually a really nice vest." And Florence just like, "I knew it. It's so cool, isn't it?" Like that little scene right there, just it gave Yelena so much more personality. Just that one exchange, and also the exchange they have in the little store that they're in, where she's making fun of Scarlett for the way she
Oh, the
poses.
pose.
That might have been my favorite part of the movie, and then the callback to it later when she lands in one of those poses and then it grosses her out a little bit.
Right,
That was
right.
so funny.
And the self-deprecating humor also plays a huge role in the MCU. They are not opposed. It's like in Thor when she kept hitting him with the car and kind of making him out to be sort of an idiot when he's kind of not an idiot, but he kind of is. Like, I love that stuff, man. That idea of, yeah, these are superheroes, but let's keep this in context. This is a kids movie, or it started out as a kids book. Let's keep this funny. I think that's one of the natural charms about the MCU that certain other publishers can't get with their own universe. Not to mention any companies, DC cough cough. I'm just saying natural charm, which is not forced on the audience member. It's just like, oh, I get that joke. That was hilarious. I love that stuff.
I would actually say that Aquaman sort of tried to go that route.
I'll see that. Yeah.
And I also think Hellboy, even though those aren't DC, Hellboy was another example of you've got a main character played by Ron Perlman who's just like he's one of those guys who just has a presence on screen. So any little quip they give him, he's going to deliver in a funny way. So that movie ended up actually being like almost half comedy to me. And yeah, I love that Marvel movies can kind of be these big action spectacles, but they're also kind of comedies. And at times they can also maybe draw a tear or two from you too. I mean, they're really good at making you feel whatever emotion they want you to feel at any given point, which sounds weird to say it that way, but like that's a Steven Spielberg thing too. Like Spielberg is great at getting you to feel a sense of wonder at the right time and a sense of dread at the right time. And
Right.
I think Marvel has sort of not parodied, but copied that in a way that really works for them.
Yeah, they've got the right mix. It's a perfect storm of different plot devices, different storytelling ideas and options, and I think they just make it click. I mean, I'm not saying they're perfect all the time, but for me, from where I'm sitting, the majority of the time, this stuff clicks. One of the things that in the Flash writers' room, which again, that's a whole other podcast, and we've done episodes here on the show about the disparity between the DC extended universe and the TV universe, which has been exceptional for the most part in the way they handle their characters. But in the Flash writers' room, they've had the mantra of hero, heart, and spectacle. You have to have the hero because that's what we're doing. You have to have the spectacle with the huge fight scenes, but the heart has to be there, or you're not going to make anyone connect to this stuff. And I think Marvel has taken that concept and just shot it to the moon and back because it's just I can't say enough good things about how they managed to take something, and dude, it's a different show, but Guardians should never have worked in the real world, handled in another universe by another director. It would have been a quirky cult classic that only some people saw. But because it's Marvel and because they know how to handle the nuances, they know how to handle character development, and they give their stuff to the right creators. And again, they have the right mix of hero, heart, spectacle, jokes, special effects, CG. It's it works and it's a blockbuster and it's fantastic. I think that's one of the major formulas that we see at play in Black Widow.
Absolutely. And they did it really well. I think one of the things that Marvel has really done, especially with Guardians, is they find the right filmmakers for a lot of these films. Like Jon Favreau was the perfect choice to helm those first couple of Iron Man movies.
Oh yeah.
And then you get James Gunn in for the Guardians movies, and his, wacky sense of humor just worked so well with those characters. But on top of that, other than one or two missteps like the Ancient One, Marvel's casting has been spot on. They always just seem to get the right people for these roles, and it just ends up being great. Like this movie, I feel. We'll talk about the villains in a little bit because that's where my one issue with this movie lies.
Mm-hmm.
But they just did such a good job casting it. Like Rachel Weisz, she's not Russian, but she played it well. Same thing with David Harbour, same thing with Yelena. And all four of them together with Scarlett, it, like you said, it really did have kind of a family dynamic. Like there was just these little exchanges they would have. Like, you named the pig after me, and she's like, what, you
Yeah.
don't see the resemblance? Like, these little ways that they dig at each other are very reminiscent of how actual family members kind of make fun of each other. So I really enjoy what they did with this movie as far as the casting goes, because like I said, Florence, for me, she stole the show, and I'm so happy that it looks like she may end up being a part of the Hawkeye series now.
Oh, that's something to look forward to, man. Um, it's great casting, as you said, and dude, that scene, it's the best scene of the film for me, apart from the end when she's finally getting one up on the big bad of the film, and the whole plot comes to light of what their plan was. Is the scene at the dinner table when they're all back together for the first time, and she's telling she's telling Natasha not to slouch, and then Natasha's getting ticked off at everyone, and Yelena's like, "What are you talking? I didn't say anything. What are you talking to me for?" And it's like this, like you said, like a rapid fire. Dude, I had to go back and watch it again because I was laughing and missed some dialogue. I had to go back and watch it again when I first watched this movie. I'm like, I got to see that part again. I
Yeah, it was
you
great.
you can see the chemistry between them is very apparent at that table too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And the specific line you're talking about, I think she goes, "I didn't say anything. That's not fair." Like
Right.
that's exactly what a little sister would say to an older sister who told her to shut up.
Yeah, that's great stuff, man. That to me is, and it's funny because like you'll pick out, like I can go back to the first Avengers and talk about the Battle of New York, and my God, that's still, apart from Endgame, it's one of the most epic things I've ever seen in a film. Just oh man, it's crazy how good it is. But if you pinpoint me on what's my favorite scenes of these Marvel films, 9 times out of 10, it's not a fight. It's just it's dialogue. It's two characters. One of them starts crying. That's the stuff that gets me hooked. And I'm the dude that's looking for the fight scenes to look good. But I just want more than that. I want more than car chases and explosions. I got to have some heart to it, which, again, this movie has. The relationship between them, and we talked about Florence Pugh quite a bit here, but she has the look of a little sister. It's great casting because you kind of feel like she could become Natasha real easy, but she kind of still has that innocence about her where she's the first one to tear up. Even though she's Stone Cold Killer, she's young enough to where she still can find some sort of redemption. But Natasha's hands, as she said in Avengers, her ledger is dripping with blood. And they reference that again. Did you
Oh
find it
yeah.
interesting that they threw that in here again by a totally different character?
Yes, and the fact that he looked at it as a good thing.
Yes.
He's like, I'm so proud. Your ledgers must be dripping with red." And you see Scarlett's face just drop, and she looks so uncomfortable, and she like shrugs off his arm and walks away. and you immediately know what she wants to say to him, but doesn't.
Right.
And then Florence is just like, oh, let me go, you stink. Like,
Right.
just immediately brings the tone back up with a laugh. Like, it just, yeah, this movie was crafted very well. But I do want to talk about the villains. That's where I think the one weak point of this movie is. At least in comparison to other Marvel movies. I'll put it that way.
So hit me first with Taskmaster because, by the way, kids, spoiler alerts, we got a bunch of them. Taskmaster's not who you may think the person is, and it's not the same person from the books. So what do you think about Taskmaster? The presentation, the costume, the whole bit.
I had no big attachment to Taskmaster going into this. I know some people are like, oh, the costume just looks too Marvel-y. Like, they should have just gone back to the look of the comics. It's like, well, the look of the comics is a little ridiculous. So
Yeah.
I get why they modernized it, and it fits within the world that they've built. I had no problem with the changes they made to the costume. I do not care that they gender flipped it whatsoever. Now, the actress playing her, Olga Kurlenko, you wouldn't think would be cast in a movie and have no lines. Like, that was weird to me.
Right.
You could have gotten any nameless, faceless, unknown actress and put her in that role, and you pick somebody who's well established in the acting world now. And so it makes me think that we may see her again down the line, because we know that she's been like gassed now and maybe regrets some of the things she's done or wants to do something else. I don't know. But I thought it was strange that they didn't have her speak even after she had her own control back. I was a little unclear on whether the chip that she had was just a control device, or was that what gave her that ability to mimic other people? I didn't quite understand that.
Um, and it all right. So here's what my guess was. If she fought you in person, she could naturally mimic you. But maybe what they were feeding to her was the fighting styles of other people that she wasn't going to come in contact with, because he tells Natasha that she can fight like your friends, something to that effect, which suggests that she can fight like Cap and Thor and Iron Man
And we
because she's
see her
been fed.
watching that footage.
Yes.
But, like, does she naturally have the mimic ability, or is it all a factor of that chip, is what I was, like, in the dark about.
And if she naturally has it, okay, if she just has it, now you're talking about mutants, because in the MCU, unless I'm forgetting someone, when we've seen abilities, we've seen, people be enhanced. It's cybernetics. It's, I was bitten by a spider. I have a suit. I have a super soldier serum. But as far as being born with something, I mean, are they, unless they just suggest, well, no, we gave this to her. Maybe that was the point, was that they gave it to her somehow. Uh, Maybe that's what they were getting at.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. Like, and that's part of the problem I have, was they didn't do enough backstory and development with the villains. Um, Now, Taskmaster, I get, was designed to sort of be a secondary villain to Ray Winstone's character.
Mhm.
So I didn't have a problem necessarily with the character not having as much screen time as some people would like. I didn't care. But Ray Winstone's character is like in one scene in the beginning and then a little bit at the end. So we weren't given enough time with that character to develop the proper hatred for him.
Mhm.
But that's sort of, maybe that complaint comes from the fact that so many Marvel heroes are defined by their villains. Like, look at Thor. Thor wouldn't be Thor without Loki.
Right.
Cap had a Red Skull in the first movie, and then in the second movie it was all about Bucky, and then the third movie's obviously just a war between heroes. But so many of the Marvel heroes have either interesting villains or villains that upstage them. And in this movie, I don't know if it was intentional that they did that, so all the attention was on Scarlett and Florence, but I just didn't feel like the villains were anything special. They kind of were a little generic. And also, the explanation of like, oh, I have these pheromones, you can't attack me when you're near me, like that was just too quick and not developed enough. Like, why? How does he have? Is it a pheromone he created, or is it natural? Like, what's the deal? So I had a lot of questions that were left unanswered by the villains, but in the end, they weren't the focus of the movie. So I'm
Mm.
not judging the movie based on them. It's just the one thing I think fell a little short.
They exist because the movie needed villains. They don't exist because of them.
Sure.
It's all about the family instead. I get that.
And I mean, Ray Winstone's character was designed to be killed off, and he was. Like, we're not going to see him again. There's no ambiguity. He was fried in that helicopter.
I mean, dude, I as soon as he opened his mouth, I thought this guy's a total scumbag. He sucks. I want him dead because he was so convincing to me, and with the little time he had, I thought he did phenomenal. I was floored by how good he was. I thought this is a typical, and I don't mean typical as in stereotypical, but he's a typical baddie. He's nothing but hate and contempt, but he thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and he's totally in control, and he's got a master plan. I did think that his performance was great.
Yes, and casting Ray Winstone is probably the smartest thing they did because he is so good at that kind of role. And you're right, that couple of minutes he had, he does make himself into a despicable character. And I think that's just a product of him being a good actor and the writing being pretty good. But I do like the creative way that they used his ability or whatever. So they're like, okay, you can't attack him because of these pheromones. So she just slams her head on the damn table as hard as she can and like completely severs those nerves or whatever it is and just takes him to school. And it's like, wow, that was brutal to watch. Like, that shocked me watching her slam her head into the table and get all bloody.
Right.
But it was like, it was effective. I really liked it. And then there's like a little tiny beat later on when she's downloading the data and she just kind of wipes her nose off and looks at it and just like, like no big deal. You know, she's been injured worse, which we saw earlier in the movie when she takes her shirt off for a split second. Yelena looks at her and sees these massive bruises on her back that are
Right.
probably
Right.
from that fight with Taskmaster. It gives you this idea like she's kind of always beat up, isn't she? Like, she's a normal human. She's a very physical fighter, so she's going to end up getting bruised just about every time she's fighting.
It reminded me of Batman when she took her shirt off. It reminded me of those moments in the books and in the movies where Bruce takes his shirt off, and unbeknownst to everybody around him, he's scarred and bruised and has open wounds. And it's like, oh my God, this guy lives like this every day.
Yeah, and you get the impression that she does too, and it it was good the way that they actually included that because it's like the one time you could have Scarlett Johansson taking off her shirt and it's not a sexual thing in any way.
Right. And dude, still, as we talking about that scene, I still didn't even it didn't even oh, she's taking her shirt off. It still didn't even click to me. Like I'm just thinking, because the only thing I saw was her back, and I thought, oh man, look at that. That's a nice touch because it makes Yelena again because she's the younger of the two. She's the more connected to their past than Natasha is because Natasha's had to block it out for a lot of different reasons. But you can tell there's still hope for this chick because she's not giving up on the concept of the family thing. And Natasha should okay, so pre Avengers breakup, maybe Natasha would have been more open to seeing these people again. But since the Avengers had all their issues, she's kind of over it. So maybe that goes hand in hand with meeting back up with her pseudo family once again.
Yeah, and I think the end sort of implied that she was going off to meet Steve and then they were going to go break into the raft, and we were almost watching the scene that takes place right before the end credit scene of Civil War when Steve shows up at the raft.
Yeah.
So, and I like how she's got the short blonde hair and she's wearing Yelena's vest, and it's like that's the costume that like
Yep.
they tie it all together. So from now on, you know, this movie in my viewing order, that's where it goes, is right after Civil War.
That's where Marvel's placed it as well. That's where they've put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I've done the Marvel. continuity watch through at least one full time, and I'm going to do it again, and then I'm going to reinsert this. The interesting thing to do is when the streaming shows have maybe not wrapped up, but have a few under your belt, go insert those as well, and
Oh my gosh.
just take like 2 full weeks, man. Just get some chips, just veg out. You know what I mean? Just be sure the bathroom's close by. Just veg out, dude. Just tell all your friends I'm never leaving the couch, man. I'm gonna make a month of this stuff.
I mean, imagine if you tried to include Agents of Shield in that too.
Oh my
Jeez.
god! Well, there's Agent Carter. Don't forget about that. Holy
Yeah,
Lord!
I
Because
mean,
you could do Agent Carter immediately after First Avenger.
and at this point, Agent Carter is probably one of the only non-Disney Plus shows that they still consider canon,
Yep.
because Agents of Shield sort of became its own thing after a while and stopped connecting to the movies, and the Netflix shows are kind of their own little separate universe. Even though there's rumors we might get Charlie Cox, possibly Kristen Ritter back, which I would love, I'm still fine with them just having their own little separate Netflix universe. Like, yeah, the initial tech on New York happens in both universes, but that's where the similarities end. I'm fine with
Well,
that.
I think the most recent word on that was that Cox was uh, not guaranteed, but confirmed to have shot a scene in the new Spider-Man flick. And if I had to venture a guess, it would be that he steps up to defend Peter in court. Because of course, when everyone finds out he's Peter Parker, they're all going to come after him and sue him and try to take everything he has, which he has nothing anyway. And my guess would be that he would be the defense attorney. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. I want to circle back to Drake. Was it Dracoff, the villain in this film?
Yeah.
I want to circle back to this because I get what you're saying. We didn't have enough time to connect to him. I looked at it from a different viewpoint because it reminded me of the Magnificent Seven, because you had Eli Wallach as Calvera, all right, and you only saw him. I think you may have only saw him 2/3 of the way into the movie, and that made Eli Wallach not want to take the role because it became, I'm not even on screen that much. Why, But one of the things that caused him to change his mind was that they talk about him all through the film. And so all through the movie, you're hearing about this dastardly villain. So he couldn't wait to get the part and play it, because then he was like, oh, I got something to live up to. I'm going to have fun with this. So I kind of liken that to this, where it's like, we heard about this guy through the film, about the Red Room, how, wait, he's not dead? What do you mean he's not dead? I killed him. No, he's not dead. You're crazy. That kind of thing. And so there's so much mystery surrounding him and how evil is this guy, that by the time we finally see him, I'm like, all right, I want him dead. I want him dead right now, because I couldn't wait till she got her hands on him. And the fact that she couldn't get her hands on him played into it for me, because I knew eventually she would, but it's almost like they just kept milking it so that when she did start beating him down, it meant more to you in the end.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like I said, I would have liked a little more development, but I do like that take, is that, this movie built him up as this boogeyman over time, and once we finally got to him, we see how powerful he really is. He literally has a floating city. Like, that is obviously a huge level of power, and if he's been able to avoid shield this whole time, he's clearly connected. So they did a good job kind of establishing how powerful he was. But I think maybe the reasoning behind it from a Marvel standpoint would have been just, this is Black Widow's movie, and we need to follow her the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So taking away any focus and doing scenes that are just showing the villain doing villain stuff is a waste of time. I mean, this movie was already
Right.
over 2 hours. So adding a bunch more stuff with the villain would have forced them to cut other things unless they wanted this to be a Snyder cut length movie. Which frankly, I could have watched 4 hours of this, to be honest with you. Like,
Oh, sure.
and it's, it's a little sad that we're not going to get Scarlet in the MCU anymore, most likely. So, other than maybe a flashback in another movie for a cameo.
It's deeply saddening to me because the first time I watched this was with my wife, and at the end, again, kids, spoiler alerts here abound. One of the post credit scene, the last one is Yelena at Natasha's grave. So I sat there and out loud said, legit, I said, "Wait a minute, what, what?" And then my wife looks at me. My wife, the non comic book nerd, the non geek of the family, the person who doesn't have Transformers and Batman and Spider-Man on the walls of her office, that doesn't have pop vinyls all over the place, looks at me and says, "She died in Endgame, remember?" And I went, "Holy crap, she did." Like, dude, I was so into the film, I forgot she was dead.
I thought there was half a second where I thought they were going to pull some Fast and Furious stuff and just be like, nope, we're bringing Scarlet back. Because
Oh,
there was that split second where Yelena does the little whistle.
yep,
And
me
and
too.
in my head, my brain was just like, Scarlett's going to whistle from off screen. She's going to turn around. She's going to be right there.
Or she turns around, the screen fades black.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then immediately Julia Louis-Dreyfus steps into frame and blows her nose. And I'm just like, oh, this is great. And this was supposed to be her character's introduction. This was supposed to be released before Falcon and Winter Soldier. So this was
Ah,
originally where we meet Contessa Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, I think is her full
De
name.
La Fontaine. She got like
Yeah.
9 names. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the De La Fontaine is where she's from. So that's an
Ah, there you
Italian
go.
thing. Now
Wow.
this is one of the many things that I know from a very weird source. So I play the Assassin's Creed games, or at least I have, like, for a long time. I haven't played this most recent one, but the main character of 3 of the games is a character named Ezio Auditore de Firenze, which he explains to one of the characters. He's just like, "Why is your name so long?" He's like, "De Firenze is where I'm from. I'm from the town of Firenze." And the guy's like, "Oh, so I would be blah 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 de Constantinople." And he's like, "Yes." So that's the last part of her name is to signify that her family is the Allegra whatever family from Fontaine. So it's a
Very
very
interesting.
strange, weird international thing that I'm not sure a lot of people even know, but I only learned it through a video game that's how that whole Italian naming system works.
Well, and other countries do it too because if you're a fan of New Japan Pro Wrestling, they introduce the last names first because it's the family name. It's your
Yes.
house name, and that they consider that more important than your first name. So I already had a hint of that already, but I get you. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a Chinese thing too, isn't it?
Maybe so. Yeah.
Cuz the way we credit do you know who Yen Wu Ping is?
Yeah, it sounds familiar. Who is it?
He's one of the most prolific fight choreographers in film history. He did all the Matrix movies.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe he helped out a little bit on one of the John Wick movies, but he's done most of the Jet Li movies and quite a bit of Donnie Yen stuff too, although Donnie Yen is himself a fight choreographer too. Now, Yen Wu Ping in our movies is credited Yen Wu Ping. Everywhere else, it's Wu Ping Yen.
Right.
So I think that is kind of more like, yeah, I think it's kind of a general Asia thing that they do, which, like, it's kind of cool. Each little area has their own thing. Like, Thor is Odin's son because he's literally Odin's son. Odin
Right.
is Odin Bor's son because
Right.
he's the son of Bor. So and Loki is Loki Laufeyson, which we got to actually hear in the Loki series. That's how they referred to him in that first episode, which I was like, oh, that's awesome that they're actually acknowledging that he's the son of Laufey. So Yeah, it's kind of interesting how different areas have different ways of using their names. Like as Americans, we just grow up thinking, oh, you have a first name, a last name, and probably a middle name, and they just go in that order. Not everywhere does it like that.
And it's funny too because that changes over time. Because my great grandfather had no middle name to speak of, uh, and it was just first and last. But meanwhile, his wife, my great grandmother, had a first name, a last name, and like five middle names because it's just what her mother did. And it's like,
Was she Spanish?
no, they were both American, but she would sit there. Now, keep in mind, this is an old lady telling us the story, but she would rattle off all of her middle names, and we're looking at each other like, "Come on, Granny, really?" And she's like, "I swear these are my middle names," and we're all in the South, and we're all just laughing at her and stuff. But like, she swore to it till the end. It was like she had, I don't know, because her first name was Molly, and it was Molly, and then Myrtle, and all these other names. And I'm like, did you just accrue these names over the years, or were you giving them at birth, or what's going on here? So
Hmm.
you're right. How different cultures handle this stuff is crazy, man. Very different.
Yeah, because I know that that is a common thing in Spanish-speaking countries. Is like you almost add the new last name from marriage to all the previous last names.
Interesting.
So like there are some people with Spanish names that are like Pedro Hernandez Fesco, blah 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 blah, like five other last names after it, but they usually only go by one,
Right.
and it's like whatever the most recent one is. But yeah, so it's interesting how different places have that kind of difference. I mean, that probably just developed as our languages diverged from each other, but yeah, it's a little confusing sometimes too, because all of a sudden you'll hear people billed by different names, and it's the name that they go by in their native country, not the way we refer to them.
So, I'm again, I'm watching the film again for the third time here, and I'm looking some stuff up as we're talking. Uh, the character of Rick Mason. Did you know that this is actually a Marvel Comics character? He's her contact that sets her up with all the stuff that she needs.
I did not know he was from the comics, and I think it's hilarious now that everybody assumed he was Taskmaster.
Yeah, I'm gonna be straight with you. I didn't even hear that. Is that what people thought?
Well, when the casting list came out, they never revealed a name for the character Taskmaster.
Ah.
And Rick Mason, people are like, oh, that just sounds like an alias. So this guy, that's got to be Taskmaster. But I'll be honest, as soon as Taskmaster got on the scene and was like standing, I was like, that's a woman in that suit. Guarantee it.
Really? You got that straight away, did you?
It was, I don't know how to explain it. It's just a body language thing. Like the way her
Right.
shoulders stood, the way her gait walked. Like, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there was a dude in the suit the entire time until the mask came off. But
Right.
I just immediately was like, I think that's a woman.
Well, Rick was portrayed in the movie by O.T. Fabinel, which I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. He's a British actor, writer, and director. And dude, talk about Yelena going to Disney Plus. Unless I'm wrong, I totally see this guy making appearances in Hawkeye.
Oh, sure. If he knows Natasha, there's a good chance he knows Clint.
Right.
Granted, we don't know how far his relationship with Natasha goes, but clearly she wasn't too upset to find him sleeping in her bed. And I
Very
love
true.
how he's just like, I wasn't even under the blanket. Like, give me a break, lady.
Right, right. I love that again, going back to the spy thing, that she sort of has her cue. Like James Bond has the guy that gives him the gadgets. She kind of has that in Rick Mason. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and at the end he sets her up with the copy Quinjet or whatever it is that they're using.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea he was a character from the comics, but that's interesting to know.
Yeah, apparently he created by James Hudnall and John Ridgway, first appeared in Marvel graphic novel number 57 in 1990. They
Oh,
just
so
call they just call him the agent. That's all they call him.
does it say if he's like specifically from Shield, or is he a
Uh
freelancer like he is in this movie?
he's the son of the Tinkerer, Phoenix Mason.
Ooh.
There you go.
We haven't had the Tinkerer yet, have we, in live
No,
action?
not that I know of.
Oh no, wait, we did in Spider-Man Homecoming. The Tinkerer is the kind of heavyset dude who literally makes all of the stuff that Vulture's using. That's him.
Holy crap. I kind of didn't put two and two together on that. That's true.
Yeah. So I guess they're changing that backstory.
Yeah. Well, they could always say he's the dad. It's just,
Well,
well, the age
one's
difference.
white and one's black.
Well,
It'd
that's
be
true. And
kind of
plus,
hard.
yeah, it'd be kind of tough. Yeah, I don't know. That's different. Um, and you know,
But again, that doesn't bother me because in the comics, Alexei and Natasha had a romantic relationship,
right.
which she also had with Clint and Daredevil. And, you know, she had a lot of relationships throughout the years. She's been in the comics for decades. So she's just like all those characters. They've sort of slept around with each other. Like, God knows how many people Tony has slept with.
Oh, for sure. And you know, Matt Murdock's probably got enough notches on his belt that, you know,
At
good
least
lord.
3 or 4 that have already appeared in the Daredevil show. Like,
Right.
you've got Karen, you've got what's her name, Elektra. So
Yep.
that's the two big ones right there. And then Natasha had Alexei. She's been with Daredevil. She's been with Clint. Clint's been with Mockingbird, who was Adriana Pilecki in Agents of Shield. Like, there's,
Right.
you know, it's like a high school. Everybody dated everybody at some point.
Very true. Um, Talking about the Black Widow character, this movie to me was a long time coming. As we said from the jump of this thing, I really thought she was going to get there before Wonder Woman was. And I don't know, it's two different characters. I totally get it, but in terms of where she is in the MCU, you know, and I've said this before on other episodes. Sometimes we'll make the comment of, well, he's the perfect so and so, she's the perfect so and so, and we're always like, yeah, no, that's right. But if it had been another actor, would we be saying that person was the perfect so and so? It's hard to know unless you're in a what if scenario where you can see multiple different realities one time and go, well, that's true, that is the perfect. I mean, she just feels like the perfect Black Widow. She's got all the components of what this character is. And I love the fact that of all the women they could have went with when they first started putting this universe together, she seemed like the most logical choice because she's an Avenger, because she bridges the gap between Shield and the Avengers, which is perfect for the MCU. She's highly necessary, and I totally know why she sacrificed herself, and it made Endgame work. And the fact that the end of Endgame is bittersweet, and you're left feeling triumphant but heartbroken at the same time. Not just because Tony's gone, but you know, Natasha's gone too. Having said all that, I hate that she's gone, dude. Like, it kills me because again, she was the glue. She meant so much to so many of these characters. And like in the end, she finally found redemption. Her character came full circle and died the right way, I guess you could say, and finally found peace with her past. But man, again, I hate she's gone, man.
Yeah, I'm sad about it too. I mean, I'm glad that Scarlett got to go out with her own movie and kind of wrap up the character in a way that was satisfying for her, because it seems like in all the interviews that I've seen, she's very happy with the end product, and she's glad that this was what they did for the character at the end instead of her end being in Endgame. Uh, you know, when they first announced the casting of this, she was, I mean, she's absolutely the perfect choice for this, because not only does Scarlett Johansson have the acting chops, but Black Widow is a character who, in the comics, like I said, is a femme fatale. She is known for being sexy and using that sexiness to disarm men and do what she needs to do. Scarlett Johansson fits that bill perfectly. And the fact that they evolved the character to be more than that over time makes me very happy. But yeah, I'm going to be sad that we don't get to see her or Steve or Tony anymore. Like, you know, we're starting to lose those original linchpins of the MCU now. Like,
Yeah.
Thor's really the only major phase 1 character that's still around besides besides Clint, right?
The Hulk.
Oh yeah, the Hulk. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he's going to be in She-Hulk, I guess. He's
Yeah.
confirmed for that.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
And then I mean, Happy Hogan, I guess, is still around through the Spider-Man movies. I don't know if he's planned to be in the next one, but I hope so. I want him and Aunt May to work out.
Do you think they're going to do that?
I hope so. I honestly do. Like this Aunt May is much different from any of the live action Aunt Mays we've seen, and I want them to keep going in that direction. And giving her a romance is something we haven't seen in any of the previous iterations. So, and it's Marissa Tomei. Like, who wouldn't fall in love with Marissa Tomei?
Oh, of course, I have. I mean, she's awesome. Um,
I still watch My Cousin Vinny once in a while to this day because of
it's a,
her.
it's a classic. It really is a classic. Yeah, uh, it's a different take on Aunt May. Totally different take, and much different take than what we saw with the original Sony Spider-Man, of course. But it works. I mean, it's okay to tweak characters, and it's okay. It's okay to tweak characters. It's okay to do gender reversals when it works, and it's okay to either young them up or old them up as you need to, because comic books are living, breathing things. And if you look at these movies as an issue of a comic books are not always in the hands of the same writer and artist through the entire run. One writer and artist will handle 2 or 3 issues in a row, then they'll hand it off to someone else sometimes. So if you look at these movies as just issues of a huge comic or of the Marvel, if just imagine the MCU as the Marvel published books, then your viewpoint on a lot of this stuff will change, because it's like, well, this is what she looks like in this director's hands, and this is what she looks like in this director's hands. But I go back to what you said earlier about Natasha. She is, I got to be, I don't know if I'd say the most consistent, but she's got to be one of the most consistent characters. No matter what movie she's in, you can count on her. Like I said before, she's a cornerstone. She's a pillar of this stuff, and I think she's, I don't know. I love the fact that they gave her this family, and we've talked a lot about Yelena here. And dude, I think I could totally see her in Hawkeye, but I could also see her back on the big screen. Um, I can envision a brand new Avengers film with her as a widow. Maybe it's Crimson Widow, maybe it's a White Widow. It doesn't necessarily have to be Black Widow, but I can completely envision that happening.
Yeah, I could too. I mean, if she doesn't show up in Hawkeye, I won't be necessarily surprised. But I mean, you can't have Julia show her a picture of Clint, be like, "This is the guy responsible for Natasha's death,"
Right.
and then not address it in some form. But I'm curious as to why that is being set up that way. So, like, we don't know who Allegra's working for necessarily. So we don't know what her intentions are. We've only seen her recruit John Walker at this point, which made a lot of people theorize about a Dark Avengers.
Well,
Yelena, I think a
she
lot of
is
people.
she
Oh,
is a Madam Hydra. She may not be the
yeah,
Madam Hydra, but she's one of them.
she is. Yes, so there could be a heel turn coming.
Yes.
Yelena, I feel like would fit better with Young Avengers, which there's no way they're not doing at some point. Like we're getting Kate Bishop, we've already got Yelena, we're getting Ironheart. I mean, they've consistently introduced new younger characters in the last several things that we've seen. So it really feels like Young Avengers is their next big team up combination movie. And I wouldn't be surprised if Yelena plays a large role in that.
And let's be honest, who's to say that Steve Rogers doesn't have a son?
This is true, but the son would still be very young if he was only unfrozen in 2009.
Well, he went back in time,
Oh, that's true.
and he could have
That's
had the kid at any time.
that's the other thing that's confusing is like if he went back in time and spent all that time with her, with Peggy, then that's like a divergent timeline. So he would have had to leave that timeline to come back to ours. So if he had a son, did he just leave his son in that other timeline? Like it would be a very weird thing for them to figure out.
Right.
Plus plus it also just lends credence to the whole the TVA is BS thing on Loki because they didn't go prune Steve's timeline when he started a relationship with Peggy and stayed there for 70 some odd years.
And the only thing that they tried to explain that away by saying some things are supposed to happen the way they happen. So they left that alone.
True. But
Yeah.
also, what happened to the timeline that 2014 Thanos leaves to come to the future in Endgame?
Ah, very good.
That timeline just continues without him. Did they go prune that one? We don't know. So that's why
Right.
that's why me and Phil have been speculating quite a bit that the TVA is just complete BS. Like, they're not as powerful as they say. It's not the real TVA, and they're not pruning all the timelines like they say.
That's messed up. Do you think and we've talked about this on the 6M before in the Avengers episodes. I mean, everyone says she's done. I'm sure she's saying that she's done. All the signs point to this is the end. This is your last look at her. You may get some flashbacks here and there. You may get some voiceovers for whatever reason at some point. But is there a possibility? Is there a world in which, for whatever reason, we're going to have the multiverse movie with Doctor Strange? Is there a possibility that we see Scarlett Johansson suited up again, back in the MCU? Maybe not the Natasha that we knew. I mean, what do you think, man? Do you think they'll ever go down that road?
If they do, I would almost want them to completely change it up. Like, I wouldn't want them to just bring in a similar version of Natasha and just say, "Oh, this is Earth 4's Natasha," but she's basically our Natasha, guys. Like, I don't want that. I would either want her to be just a straight up crazy villain,
Yeah.
like Natasha Romanoff just stayed with the Red Room the whole time and maybe took
Oh,
it over, or just have her play a different character, which, if you're doing multiverse stuff, they've already sort of started doing that in other properties that we've seen. So, like, all the multiversal Lokis are completely different,
right. Right.
except for President Loki, who was also Tom Hiddleston. So they could very easily just be like, yeah, in different universes, people are born different people sometimes. So in that next universe, maybe Natasha is the one who's running Hydra, not Allegra, or whatever they
Ooh.
decide to do. So, but there's rumors, I don't know how true this is. There's rumors that Ryan Reynolds really does not want to work with her because ex-wife. So
Ah.
that may be a whole thing, like, okay, we're bringing Deadpool to the MCU, so we're not bringing Natasha back.
Yeah. I mean, part of
It'd
me
be a
says,
shame, but you know,
right. Yeah, I'm with you. Part of me says I hate that. The other part of me says she had such a fitting ending. I mean, it's like Jordan going out with the last shot. Why? How in the world do you get? How in the world do you play for the Wizards after going out on top? Like, I feel like she's going out on top. If you bring her back now, Tony Stark went out on top. How in the world? And we're going to see 3D Tony at some point. We're going to see him as the AI in the next suit. I almost guarantee it. At least the voice. And I totally understand why he's the tech guy. Why wouldn't he have uploaded his consciousness into an AI at the very end? And the program had been in place for years for that to happen. I think I can totally see that. But at the same time, what a glorious way to go out for her. I mean, she just, I don't know. Like I said earlier, she's the glue that held a lot of things together. And with her gone, all these characters are going to have to find a way to move forward without her, and including this new family, which I hope we haven't seen the last of, man, because I love David Harbour. And I don't know how you bring him back. I don't know. Can you see him showing up on Disney Plus, or is he more of a blockbuster, big budget? You know what I'm saying? Like, how far you think they'll go with this thing?
I could definitely see him showing up in another movie, even if it's just a glorified cameo, like Yelena is visiting with him or something at the beginning of her next movie, whatever it might be. But yeah, David Harbour, he's a great actor, and he's obviously like more in demand now than he used to be. Stranger Things sort of made him blow up, but Hellboy was a big failure, that last
Oh yeah,
Hellboy movie with him.
yeah.
So I'm glad he got another chance at the comic book genre, and he seemed to have a great time doing this movie. So yeah, I'd love to see him pop up again. Maybe if they do a season 2 of Captain America and the Winter Soldier.
Ooh, nice.
We could see him pop up there, and like maybe he goes to Cap for help with something. Like, he's got some unfinished business in Russia, and he decides that Captain America is the right person to help, even if it's not the Captain America that he pretends he fought a bunch of times.
Oh, I'm so here for that. I hope we see it. Um, well, the movie's doing well. I hope it continues to do well. I hope it makes all the money. Again, this is my third time. I'm sure I'll watch it more than three. I
Oh,
tend to binge.
one thing we
Yes,
didn't talk about was, how do you feel that they did with Taskmaster's mimic abilities? Like, did you catch all the references to the other fighting styles?
I caught the stuff with Cap when he's in there with Red Guardian fighting him because he had the motions with the shield. So I totally picked up on that. As far as Thor, I don't know if I picked up on him mimicking Thor or not.
I didn't necessarily get anything from Thor, but like the first scene we see with her fighting Natasha on the bridge, she immediately copies Natasha's little head scissor takedown move.
Yes, that was
Later
great.
later on, after she throws the shield and Red Guardian swats it away, she starts throwing her knife around just like Bucky did in Winter Soldier.
Ah, well done. I didn't. I missed that one to be honest. That's good.
Now, I don't know if there was any references to anyone else specifically. I think maybe some of the bow and arrow shot was obviously like, oh, well, Clint shoots a bow and arrow, so she can shoot a bow and arrow. But
Right.
I also felt like when she was there, that scene where they're both kind of shooting down towards the ground as the whole place is exploding around them, and she takes out a sword. And I was like, oh, she may be copying a little bit of Ronin here, because he's really the only sword guy in the MCU right now.
Very true.
So it definitely felt like they made an effort to show the mimic abilities a little bit. But I think one of the major complaints I saw online was like, oh, we didn't get to see Taskmaster actually do that enough. And I caught enough of it to be satisfied, but I understand why some people might not think it was done as well as it could have been.
I think I'm okay with what they showed. I think they
Yeah.
had an amount of time for her in the story, and I think it made sense. So all right, so we were talking about the possible futures of some of these characters. The Taskmaster villain is pretty freaking cool, but I don't know how you adapt that and make it a hero. I don't know if you can. I guess you can do anything you want to. You're Marvel. You've done it all so far. But is there a world in which, okay, she's no longer being controlled, but guess what? Being a villain pays pretty good. I'm just going to keep doing this.
Well, I could actually see them going more of the route of introducing the actual Taskmaster from the comics, like that guy.
Right.
Maybe have his ability be something that's more natural and not chip induced. I don't know, but yeah, I immediately thought like, oh, if they're changing this Taskmaster completely, then they're maybe holding on to the regular Taskmaster for a future project. Which I would love to see Taskmaster in the next Deadpool project, because Deadpool's the one person Taskmaster cannot copy because he's so chaotic.
Very true.
So in the comics, Deadpool is more than willing to hurt himself if it hurts his opponent too. And that's something Taskmaster wouldn't want to do. So whenever they come up against each other, Deadpool usually wins pretty easily.
Right.
So I would love to see it used in that fashion, but bringing back Olga, I think, would be interesting because Olga Kurlenko is a decent actress, and now we have this character with a messed up face and probably the most tragic backstory of anyone in the MCU.
Right. It's pretty
Like,
bad.
she was blown up as a child and then raised in this red room environment with a chip in her head. Like, she's literally never had a life of her own, like even more so than Scarlett and Florence's characters.
And the whole idea of Scarlet had to do this one thing in order to get out, in order to defect the shield, was very John Wick for me. Like she had to do this heinous thing, and then she could get out.
Also,
Like,
what a messed up thing to ask her to do. Like, hey, we need you to murder this guy. His daughter's going to be there too. She's going to die too.
yeah, because the daughter leads you to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was, I was almost shocked that they went that far with it, cuz you're supposed to know that Black Widow's done some messed up stuff in her life, but literally showing her trying to kill a child was a line that I did not expect the MCU to cross.
Is that why they didn't show the little girl's face so you couldn't connect to her? Maybe.
Sure, and she was only really mentioned maybe one other time, later when Yelena's like, "You never mentioned his daughter."
Hmm.
Like, they really did not. They kind of buried the lead. They really did not put in a bunch of clues that said, "Oh yeah, it's going to be the little girl."
Well, to their credit, go back to the first Avengers. She did tell Loki that her ledger's got a lot of red in it.
Oh yeah,
And,
for sure.
what if that wasn't the worst thing she ever did? There's stuff that she did that we probably won't know about now. I'm sure that was right up there, but how much other stuff did she do that now those stories may not be told unless Clint tells them in Hawkeye, which he could.
Or Yelena. Like, who knows how long her and Yelena actually worked side by side?
True.
And Yelena's probably done some messed up stuff because she was still in that program up until recently, which that's another thing. Did they tell us exactly how long she was out from under that influence before her and Scarlett met up again? Like, was it supposed to be days, weeks, months?
It felt like days to me. It didn't feel maybe you could say weeks, but it didn't feel like a long time to me. It felt like pretty soon afterward.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I was like a little thrown off by the fact that she was already just seemed like she was back to normal. Like there wasn't really a lot of residual effects from that mind or the brainwashing thing that they did with her.
Well, she had had enough time to send the red dust to her internationally. So that
And
takes
then
time.
Scarlet would have had to get to her too. So we're talking at least a few days back and forth.
Yeah, maybe longer than that. I mean, how long does a package take to travel internationally? Um, because she was in Norway and Yelena sent it from where did Yelena send it from? That's the
Yeah,
question.
we have no idea. Plus, we have no idea how long she had it before sending it to her.
Very true. Yeah.
So I was a little confused by that. Like I didn't know exactly when that scene was supposed to be happening in the general timeline of Natasha's life, but it seemed relatively recent compared to their meetup in the apartment.
And we're led to believe that Natasha was never under the influence of this stuff because they kicked it into full gear after she got out.
Right. So she was like just straight up indoctrinated and brainwashed the normal way.
Right.
And then all these other girls were being controlled chemically or however they decided to describe it. I think it was chemically, they said.
Yeah,
And
mind
now we have a
altering.
ton of other widows out there too. So I'm wondering if maybe we're going to start to see some of them pop up in the future. Like maybe some of them go work for Sword or Shield after this.
And seeing all these women fighting together reminds me of the Dora Milaje. I mean, that would be an interesting crossover to have at some point.
Yeah. That scene where Black Widow was trying to fight all those girls in the office was great.
Oh
They,
man.
because they really were beating the crap out of her. Like
Yeah.
they did not hold back. And then there's that scene where she just starts shooting her wrist thing at him.
Yes.
And at first I was like, why didn't you just do that in the beginning? But it was kind of cool to like she's getting beat up and then all of a sudden she has the upper hand and she's just taking them out one by one by one by one by one. It was just kind of a cool way to end that scene, I thought.
Oh yeah, for sure. And your point brings me to a point that I haven't mentioned through this entire show. Natasha takes the most insane bumps through this movie. She probably shouldn't have made it out of the opening scene. She probably should have been dead. Like the car flipping, she fell off a building, didn't even break a bone. I mean, I'm not going to say it took me out, but it kind of took me out, and I had to dismiss it and keep moving. I got to suspend my disbelief. She falls off a building, but she's on her feet. No concussion. She's barely got a bloody nose, no broken bones to speak of, and no open wounds that need to be stitched closed. And I'm like, the first season of Daredevil, he's in one fight and is laid up for a week. And he's no more powerful than she is. And like,
Yeah.
oh man, that if I focus on it too much, I'll totally get taken out of the element of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I have to give the Marvel movies a little leeway with that. Like, yeah, she's not super powered, but she's supposed to be like the peak of human conditioning.
Yeah.
So she can ignore pain, her adrenaline's running. they addressed injuries a little bit with the bruises after that initial fight, but she wasn't exactly limping or anything. So
Yeah,
yeah,
very true.
she did take a lot of bumps without necessarily selling, but it is what it is. It's a Marvel movie. I mean, they almost made a joke out of them crashing a helicopter after running out of gas, and they all just get out of it and they're like, "Yep, told you we were going to run out of gas." And
Yep. Don't worry, we have plenty. We have plenty. And then
that
boom.
scene that cracked me up though, because it's like Alexi's like, "I'm sure we'll be fine," and then it just cuts to the helicopter slamming into the ground.
Oh man. That yeah, there's so many moments of this film that remind you, and I don't say that with tongue in cheek. It reminds you it's a Marvel film because just when you think they're going to go one direction, they'll throw in humor or they'll throw in a serious moment. Um, this just jumped into my head too when Alexei is talking to Yelena by herself in the bedroom and he starts singing her favorite song, "The Day the Music Died,"
Yeah.
and it's he's singing it and then he stops and speaks the lyric instead of singing it, and he gets very serious all of a sudden. And I'm like, oh man, that grabbed me. There's so many moments of what these actors do in this film that just grabs me unexpectedly. And as funny as he can be and as detached as he can be, he really does have a level of connection to these girls. And I can't believe that we're not going to see him again. I would be stunned if this was the first and only time he's talked about, mentioned, we see him, even out of costume. I don't know why you do all that work and just leave it alone and you never see him again. That seems a little nuts to me.
Yeah, I think we'll see him at some point, even if it's like an end credit sequence in some other movie where he's just at a bar telling a story or something. Like
Oh yeah.
they'll bring David Harbour back in if they can.
That's great.
I
That's
mean,
great. I would love that.
Rachel Weisz, her character wasn't quite as strong, but I wouldn't be surprised if we saw her show up again too. I really wouldn't even be surprised if, based on the very positive reaction to Florence Pugh's performance, if she ends up getting her own movie or show after this, because people loved her. Like, she's one of the few things that I haven't seen a single bit of criticism on online. Everybody seems to have like, oh, there's this nitpick or that nitpick, but Yelena was great. Like,
Right.
that seems to be the through line in every review that I'm seeing.
And if you want to continue the Black Widow character, but do it in a way that's not mimicking, this is how you do it. And that's why people are having such heartburn, not just for that reason, but there's such heartburn over doing anything with T'Challa and the Black Panther. Because even though the
Ugh.
actor himself is actually gone, and I know it's a different level of thing here, but Shuri did not chew up the scenery with him as much as Yelena did with Natasha. And had she done that, and had she been more on his level and more fighting side by side, and it's like a buddy action drama like this kind of felt like in spots, maybe there wouldn't be such heartburn over, listen, we miss Chadwick, we hate he's gone, but Shuri is perfect. But now we've got such a debate over people saying, oh, you shouldn't do it, it's disrespectful. And I'm like, if you could ask Chadwick Boseman right now, he would say, I put a lot of work into this character. People love this character. This character needs to keep going.
And they'll probably do something similar to what have you seen Fast 9?
Oh no, I am not a fast guy, dude.
Okay, so do you care if I spoil a scene in it
Oh,
for you?
spoil it to death, brother.
All right, so they're probably going to do something similar in here that they did with Paul Walker's character in that movie, which was, he's not in the movie. They explain his absence by saying he's the one looking over Vin Diesel and Michelle Rodriguez's son while they're off on their adventure. And then the movie ends with them all gathered for a barbecue, and you see Brian's blue Skyline that he's had for a few movies pull up right at the end, showing like, oh, he is at the barbecue. Like, they're keeping him alive in that universe, even if the actor isn't. So I could see them doing something similar with this, being like, oh, he's continuing his public outreach programs in the United States and trying to, you know, get some of these people in these ghettos better lives, like he implied he was going to do at the end of the first movie.
Right.
So there'll be some kind of explanation, and then we'll get more focus on the women, which That's what that movie needs to be. It shouldn't just be Shuri. It should be all three of those strong women that they established in Black Panther taking center stage. So we got Okoye, you got Nakia, and then you got Shuri. Those three women were great in Black Panther, all for different reasons. And I want to see those characters put to the forefront. And I know that there's also a Women of Wakanda series planned about the Dora Milaje now.
I love that. I'm here for that. That's going to be awesome.
I believe we do already have Denai Guerrera confirmed for that. I have no idea who else is going to be in it and when it's supposed to come out, but I think it's supposed to be after the Black Panther 2 movie comes out.
It'll be
Which they
interesting to see how they handle that for sure.
I mean I think they like just started filming or about to start filming Black Panther 2.
Wow.
Because there was some like, one of those girls posted a workout pic online being like, it's almost time for day one or something like that.
Wow, that's awesome.
So I'm very curious to see what they do, but I really want it to be a story about all three of those women and not just Shuri, because they already set so much of the table to do that. Like they did so much work in that first movie, making all three of those characters individually different and unique. Like you've got, Nakia is out there fighting for the disenfranchised and trying to stop people from falling into the slave trade. Okoye is this just unbelievably loyal general who will do anything and anything for her country. And then you've got Shuri, who, despite the fact that she's a little on the sarcastic side, is also this mega genius. So each of those characters is very well defined in completely different ways. And I want to see them back. Like, I don't want to see them ignore all that work that they did.
A lot of great characterization there. And you're right. Yeah, I mean, because I'm sure the movie's going to be more about them. It's going to be about the actual country of Wakanda, the progress they've made, letting the outside world in. There's a lot of story left to tell. I go back to the idea of, Yelena can continue the Black Widow heritage, the Black Widow idea and the character, and they need that for Black Panther because you can call the movie Black Panther, but it's not unless you have a Black Panther. So I firmly believe we're going to see somebody in that suit, and I'm sure however they handle it's going to be done tastefully. I mean, you know, um, all due respect to the family of Heath Ledger, but the Joker is going to live on, and that we may not like what they've done so far, but it's the character has been around for a long time. So like, we can applaud someone's performance, and I absolutely do with Boseman because that maybe still is my favorite Marvel film. But at the same time, it's the idea of these characters deserve to keep going, and I mean, they'll walk the fine line to get there. Do you think Yelena at some point is called Black Widow, or you think they'll just steer away from that?
I mean, they could always go with, White Widow because she's wearing a white outfit now, or,
Right.
whatever. Like, there's a million things they could do. They could give her a whole new code name or just call her simply the Widow. Like,
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of ways they could go about that. I don't think she necessarily has to have a code name.
yeah. Just
I mean,
Yelena would work.
yeah, I mean, we're kind of getting to a point where like they're making jokes out of these people having these funny names now. So we're also going to get to a point where they just have some people who don't use them, like Doctor Strange and Spider-Man's exchange and
Right.
in Endgame, where he's just like, "Oh, we're using our superhero names. Oh, I'm Spider-Man." And
Right.
it's like, well, no, his name really is Dr. Stephen Strange. So, like, yeah, it's just kind of funny how they do that stuff now. And I think we'll get to a point where she just is Yelena.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that too. Um, the fact that this movie comes full circle, not only for Natasha but for the family, is awesome because we saw through most of this film Natasha sort of getting hit, not just hinting, but flat out saying it didn't mean anything. It wasn't real. The 3 years we spent as a family wasn't real. It was all pretend. It was all for the sake of the mission. It was crap, in other words. And it always tore Yelena apart. But by the time the movie comes to the grand finale, and she flat out tells her, "Forgive me, sister," she says it was real to me too. So finally, she's faced her demons, she's conquered them, and she's embraced this new family again. I mean, just watching the end of this movie again, dude, it's so cool. again, it's like I dude, I gush a lot over what Marvel does. And there's been other film franchises that have done great, really good jobs with their stuff. But in terms of tying everything together, people let the costumes and the CG, take away from the actual storytelling, and they'll focus just on that. But like these creators have such a knack for tying everything together, and I think it's the one thing that the Star Wars universe, by comparison, has failed at in a lot of regard. They'll retrofit stuff to fit and to connect. When Marvel just makes simple, easy connections that maybe you didn't see before, but it makes sense when they do it. I think it's what makes a movie like Black Widow succeed in the end.
Yeah, it's benefited them to have Kevin Feige sort of leading the charge
Yeah.
because you do have that common feel throughout all the movies. Like all the movies have different directors, different art directors, different script writers, but they're all sort of working from a space of like these movies have to look like they take place in the same universe. So you're not going to have a Black Widow movie look significantly different from a cinematography standpoint as a Captain America movie because why would they? This takes place in the same universe. So I like that there is consistency. Like Kevin Feige sort of keeps that consistent tone across everything, even though he's giving all these different filmmakers like Taika Waititi and other people a fair amount of creative control. They all still feel like they belong together. And, to go back to your Star Wars comparison, those didn't. And that's because they weren't run by one person consistently. George Lucas gave up all that control. And then we had what's her face? I can't think of her name right now. Kathleen Kennedy.
Yes.
She's been sort of the person in charge, and she's done a lot of great stuff like Star Wars Rebels, Star Wars Clone Wars, those very highly rated shows. Force Awakens, pretty good. Mandalorian, very good. Like she's just as responsible for the good stuff as the bad stuff, but
Hmm.
she's she's getting a lot of unnecessary blame, I feel, from people. And it's like, listen, she was given this job by Disney, and they basically told her, listen, what George did was good. Try to do something a little different.
Right, right.
She's trying, and she's succeeding sometimes and failing other times, and that's just going to be what happens. But Kevin Feige has had the benefit of being there the entire time, even when these were under the Paramount banner before Disney got involved. Feige was the guy.
Very true.
So like he's been at Marvel Studios forever. Like he's listed as a producer on some of those older X-Men movies even.
Yeah, it's that connectivity, that connecting tissue of Feige, man. It's the Feige verse. The whole freaking thing is, dude. I mean, it's awesome. The good news is that I see a lot of the stuff continuing from this film. The bad news is, of course, we've lost Scarlett Johansson as a character anyway, and that sucks. We've lost the actual Black Widow, but I think there's enough meat on the bone here left to tell some pretty compelling stories in the future. Um, it may be tough to bottom line this movie because we've talked a bunch about it, but what do you think, man? Give me your last word on Black Widow.
I mean, I recommend it for anybody who's a fan of the MCU, Scarlett Johansson, or just superhero stuff in general. I think it's a strong outing, and it has possibly some of the better individual character work we've seen in a while, just in regards to Scarlett, Yelena, Alexei, like the way they interacted. It's a fun movie all around. It's not perfect, but really no movie is. You can nitpick anything. So yeah, I give it a solid. It's like a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. Somewhere in that range. Like it's good. It's not perfect, but I'll watch it again and I'll tell other people to watch it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know if I'm so on Kevin Smith's mode where I love everything despite its faults, because I can see some faults in this film. As you said, nothing's perfect. But if I was told, hey, this is phase 4, this is after a pandemic that, whole different topic for another time, but stopped everything, hurt a lot of innocent people, and did worse to them, and everybody's cooped up. But this is the way to kick it back off after the shows. I mean, I would say job well done. I think it it checks all the boxes. I think it does everything it needs to do with getting people back into this universe. And some of us nerds never actually leave it, but I dig it, man. And as you said, I definitely recommend it. If you're a MCU person, then you're going to love this. And if you're just a casual moviegoer, you'll probably enjoy it as well. I think it's a great way to restart this thing and get it kicked into high gear. And I can't wait, as I always say with these films, I can't wait to see what they do next. And that is Black Widow. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.